What do you do when the empire you built betrays you for a lie? You're just a little too old school for where we're headed. We need someone who can innovate. My name is James Whitaker. I'm 58 years old, and until this morning, I was the chief financial officer at Horizon Industries for 12 years. I joined when we were a struggling family business with 2 small factories in Indianapolis. Now we're a publicly traded company with 14 plants across the Southeast. I helped navigate us through 2 economic downturns, a merger scare, and more boardroom politics than I care to remember. I'm not flashy. I don't schmooze investors at cocktail parties, but the numbers were always right. The books were always clean, and we never missed a filing deadline on my watch. Yet, as I sat in my office, staring at a cryptic email from an unknown sender hinting at irregularities in our accounts, I wondered if my loyalty had blinded me to a darker truth. Then Ethan Caldwell arrived, 34 years old with his tailored suits and smart glasses. The board brought him in as CEO 5 months ago, and he swept through our offices like a wildfire, talking about convergence and transformation and redefining strategy. I knew what was coming the moment he scheduled our first one-on-one meeting. "The market's changing, James," he said today, leaning back in my chair, with his feet propped on my desk. "We need someone who speaks the language of modern finance." I said nothing, just nodded once and offered a firm handshake. "We're bringing in Liam Bennett, 27, brilliant mind, just did a TEDx talk on financial disruption that's gaining serious buzz online." "I see," I said, my voice steady. "When's the transition?" Ethan smiled, surprised by my calm. 3 weeks. We'll announce it at the next board meeting." His smirk lingered as he handed me a folder labeled New Vision. But inside, I found a single sheet with my name crossed out in red ink. A silent warning. I packed my personal items that afternoon while everyone was in an all-hands meeting about our bold new path. 12 years in this office and everything fit in a single cardboard box. Family photos, a commemorative plaque from our IPO, the leather notebook my wife Margaret gave me before she passed. On my way out, I noticed Clara from accounts holding back tears by the elevator. She'd been with me since day one. "Don't worry," I told her. "It's all part of the cycle." What I didn't tell her was that I'd spent the last 8 months quietly documenting a series of questionable transactions that started appearing in our books shortly after Ethan arrived and grew more frequent after he mentioned bringing in his finance prodigy, Liam. That cryptic email had tipped me off. Signed only "a friend," pointing to a specific vendor payment that didn't add up. A thread I'd been pulling ever since. I wasn't planning revenge. I was just doing my job, keeping the books clean, even on my way out. I grew up working in my father's auto shop in Bloomington, Indiana, just outside Indianapolis. He taught me that numbers don't lie, even when people do. I put myself through college restocking shelves and balancing his books at night. When I graduated, I turned down bigger offers to stay local, working my way up through regional firms until Horizon's founder, Arthur Coleman, called me personally in 2011. "I need someone who can keep us steady through this downturn," he said. "Someone who sleeps better when the books balance." My father's voice echoed in my mind as I left the office, his old ledger from the shop tucked in my box, a reminder of the integrity I swore to uphold. For 9 years, Arthur and I built Horizon into something solid. When he retired, the transition was smooth. The new CEO, Susan Hayes, respected the systems we'd created. We disagreed sometimes, but she listened. We grew steadily. No flashy moves, just solid business practices and clean accounting. Then Susan retired, and the board wanted fresh energy. Enter Ethan Caldwell with his Stanford MBA and a stint at a Seattle tech startup that had more hype than profit. The day he arrived, a strange delivery came to my desk. An antique pocket watch with a note that read, "Time's up, old man." I dismissed it as a prank, but the ticking haunted me. The first red flag appeared during his 3rd week. He bypassed our procurement protocols to hire a branding consultant, his former colleague, at 3 times our standard rate. When I questioned it, he smiled. "We're thinking bigger now, James. The old constraints don't apply." The second flag came when he restructured our reporting lines, so finance went through his new chief strategy officer before reaching him. The third was overhearing him tell someone on the phone that our books had a lot of outdated methodology that needed creative solutions. Later that week, I found a shredded document in the executive lounge trash, pieces of an invoice from a company I'd never heard of, with Ethan's initials scrawled in the margin. I started watching more closely. Small irregularities appeared. Vendor contracts with companies I couldn't properly vet. Consultancy fees without deliverables. Budget reallocations without department head signatures. My team noticed too. Marcus from internal audit stopped by one evening as I was reviewing the quarterly statements. "Something's off with the new software investment tracking," he said quietly. "Numbers don't match from entry to report." "Document everything," I told him. "Just keep it factual." Marcus hesitated, then whispered that he'd seen Liam meeting late at night with a board member in a parked car outside the office. An odd detail that stuck with me. Margaret would have told me to make waves, stand up in a board meeting, go out with a bang. But cancer took her 4 years ago, and without her spark, I'd grown more methodical, more patient. So instead of confrontation, I kept detailed records, downloaded suspicious transactions, cross-referenced irregularities, all while maintaining the same calm demeanor in meetings, even as Ethan brought in more of his people and pushed out mine. I wasn't being paranoid. The patterns were too consistent. Something bigger was happening, and it centered around this new finance star, Liam Bennett. Every night, I locked my office door, paranoid that someone was watching, the weight of that anonymous email growing heavier. My final board meeting lasted exactly 19 minutes. There was no mention of my 12 years of service, no thank you speech, no plaque or watch, just a line on the agenda that read, "CFO Transition Update." Ethan spoke about bold new fiscal strategies while I sat silently at the far end of the table. The chairman, Charles Ramsey, couldn't quite meet my eyes. He'd been on the board when Arthur hired me. Now he simply nodded along with Ethan's presentation about how Liam Bennett would revolutionize our approach to capital management. As Ethan spoke, I noticed Liam slip a flash drive to a board member, their eyes darting nervously toward me, a fleeting moment that screamed conspiracy. I'd hoped for at least some acknowledgement from Charles, some recognition of what we'd built together. Instead, the meeting moved briskly to the next agenda item, the new headquarters Ethan wanted to build in the city center. As everyone filed out, Charles paused briefly by my chair. "You've been an asset, James," he said, awkwardly patting my shoulder. "Best of luck." An asset, like a piece of machinery that had depreciated. His handshake felt cold, and I spotted a monogrammed cufflink with the same logo as the mysterious vendor invoices, a chilling coincidence. I walked back to my office, Liam's office now, to collect my box. Through the glass wall, I could see Ethan showing him around, pointing at the charts on my walls like they were relics. Clara was waiting by my door, holding an envelope. "The accounting department took up a collection," she said, "for a proper send-off dinner." I thanked her, knowing I wouldn't use it. As she turned to leave, I asked, "Clara, when did those invoices from Pinnacle Ventures start coming in?" She thought for a moment. "March, I think. Right after Mr. Caldwell announced the Cloud Integration Initiative. March, 2 weeks before Ethan first mentioned bringing in Liam." Clara leaned in, her voice low. "James, I found a hidden folder on the server last week, labeled Project Eclipse. It's password protected, but the metadata shows Liam as the creator. That night at home, I spread all my documentation across my dining room table. 8 months of suspicious transactions, invoices for services never rendered, foreign consulting fees without tax documentation, and most telling, shell vendors that all traced back to a holding company called Summit Dynamics, which had been registered just 5 days before Ethan was announced as CEO. The pattern was clear now. Ethan hadn't brought in Liam because I was old school. He'd brought him in because they had a system, siphoning company funds through fake vendors and consultants, hiding it in complex cloud integration costs that were hard to question in today's business environment. They needed me gone because I asked too many questions, kept too close an eye on the details. As I worked, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." My heart raced, but I saved the message. Another piece of the puzzle. I sat back in my chair, looking at the evidence laid out before me. For the first time since Margaret died, I felt something beyond the numb routine of daily existence. Not anger exactly, something colder, more focused. I opened my laptop and began organizing everything methodically. Cross-references, timelines, account trails. I wasn't going to confront Ethan. I wasn't going to call an emergency board meeting or go to the press. That wasn't my style. No, I would do what I'd always done, let the numbers tell the story, but this time I'd make sure the right people were listening when they spoke. I couldn't shake the feeling that a friend was still out there, watching, perhaps an ally, or a trap. A week after my departure, I decided to reach out to Charles Ramsey directly. Despite his lukewarm goodbye, he'd always been fair. He deserved a chance to address this before it got worse. I called his office and left a message with his assistant. Just wanted to discuss some financial concerns from my final weeks. Nothing urgent, but worth reviewing. He called back the next day, his voice guarded. "James, good to hear from you. Ethan mentioned you might reach out." My stomach tightened. "Did he?" "Yes. He said you were having trouble transitioning. Said you had some concerns about our new systems that Liam already addressed." His tone shifted, almost mocking, and I heard a faint click on the line. "Someone else listening?" "Charles, there are irregularities that predate Liam's arrival, significant ones." Silence on the line. Then, "Look, James, I understand this is difficult. 12 years is a long time, but the board has full confidence in Ethan's vision, and Liam has already streamlined several processes you flagged as problematic. That's not... I'm afraid I have another call. Perhaps we can catch up at the holiday party. I hear you're still on the invite list." Very generous of Ethan, considering what? I wanted to ask, but Charles had already hung up. That night, my doorbell rang. No one was there, but a blank envelope lay on my porch, containing a single photo of me leaving the office that day. Someone was following me. The next morning, I received an email from Horizon's legal department. The language was carefully neutral, but the message was clear. Any accusations of financial impropriety without substantial evidence could be considered defamatory. They kindly reminded me of my confidentiality agreement. They were closing ranks. Ethan obviously had anticipated I might notice the discrepancies and had already poisoned the well. The email sender was a law firm I'd never dealt with, but a quick search revealed it was linked to Summit Dynamics, a direct threat wrapped in legalese. I decided to try another approach. Marcus from Internal Audit had been on my team for 7 years. If anyone else had noticed problems, it would be him. We met at a diner far from the office. Marcus looked nervous, constantly checking over his shoulder. "They promoted me," he said before I could even ask about the accounts. "New title, big raise. I'm now reporting directly to Liam." "Congratulations," I said, keeping my tone even. "How's that working out?" Marcus stared at his coffee. "They've changed all the internal reporting systems. New software, new protocols. Liam says it's more efficient." "And is it?" He looked up, his expression strained. "James, I can't. They had me sign additional NDAs. They're watching everyone who worked closely with you." He slid a napkin across the table with a scribbled note. "Check the offshore accounts, Cayman link." Then he crumpled it and left. "I see. They're saying things, James, about why you left." "What things?" Marcus lowered his voice. "That you were resistant to necessary changes. That you made mistakes in the last quarter's reporting that Liam caught. Some people are even saying there were ethical concerns." My hands gripped my coffee mug so hard I thought it might break. They weren't just pushing me out. They were destroying my reputation to cover their tracks. "I should go," Marcus said, throwing cash on the table. "I've got a mortgage and twins starting college next year." "I can't." "It's all right," I said, forcing a smile. "Take care of your family, Marcus." As he left, I noticed a man in a dark jacket outside the diner, watching us through the window, his phone pressed to his ear. As he hurried out, I sat alone, processing what I'd learned. My options were dwindling. The board wouldn't listen. My former team was either bought off or scared silent. And now they were attacking my reputation, making it nearly impossible for me to raise concerns without looking like a disgruntled ex-employee. They thought they had me cornered, but they'd overlooked something important. I still had access to the audit server. During my final days, while everyone thought I was quietly cleaning out my office, I'd set up an emergency admin account, a standard practice for system transitions that no one had bothered to check. It wouldn't last forever, but it might be enough. That night, as I logged in, the screen flickered, and a pop-up warned, "Unauthorized access detected." I froze, heart pounding, but the system let me proceed. For now. That night, I used my emergency credentials to access Horizon's audit server. I suspected they'd eventually discover and remove the account, so I worked efficiently, following the money trails I'd already identified. What I found made my earlier suspicions seem quaint by comparison. Summit Dynamics wasn't just one holding company. It was a hub and a network of shell entities, all interconnected through a maze of transactions designed to hide their relationship. Some dated back to before Ethan even joined Horizon, suggesting this wasn't an opportunistic theft, it was a planned infiltration. The more I dug, the clearer the picture became. Ethan hadn't been hired despite his mediocre track record. He'd been installed. His previous company, the Seattle startup with more hype than profit, had been bankrolled by the same investment group that had recently gained 3 seats on Horizon's board, including the seat held by Charles Ramsey's cousin, Nathan, who joined 8 months ago. Deep in the server, I found a deleted email chain between Ethan and an unknown account, discussing Project Eclipse and a final payout in the Caymans. A smoking gun. This wasn't just an executive skimming from the company. This was a coordinated attack on Horizon itself, a slow-motion asset strip disguised as modernization. I downloaded everything I could find, organizing it meticulously. By dawn, I had traced over $9 million, 0 cents, that had been siphoned from various departments through falsified vendor contracts, inflated service agreements, and phantom consultancy fees. As I saved the files, my home security system beeped. A motion sensor triggered in the backyard. I grabbed a flashlight, but found nothing except a single cigarette butt near the fence, still warm. Exhausted, I made coffee and sat on my back porch, watching the sun rise over the White River. Margaret and I had bought this house for the view. Water calms your overthinking brain, she'd said. Now I let the river's steady flow organize my thoughts. My initial instinct to quietly alert the board had been naive. This went deeper than Ethan and Liam. Some board members were likely complicit, which explained why they'd been so eager to replace Susan with an outsider when she retired. The anonymous email, the pocket watch, the photo on my porch. Someone was either warning me or taunting me, and I needed to know who. I needed to be smarter about this, more strategic. I spent the morning mapping connections between board members, Ethan's previous associates, and the shell companies. By afternoon, I'd identified 3 board members who were likely unaware of the scheme. Rachel Thornton, a former logistics executive who joined the board after retiring from a competitor, Vijay Sharma, who represented our workers' pension fund, and George Ellison, our oldest board member, who rarely spoke but never missed a vote. I also found a news article about a whistleblower at Ethan's old startup who'd vanished after exposing fraud. His name was vaguely familiar, like a ghost from that anonymous email. I also discovered something I'd overlooked. Liam Bennett had worked at Pinnacle Ventures, one of the shell vendors, 4 years ago. His name was buried in their incorporation documents as a founding partner, though he'd been removed from public-facing materials before being hired at Horizon. As I compiled this information, my phone rang. The number was blocked, but I answered anyway. "Is this James Whitaker?" a woman's voice asked. "Speaking." "My name is Lauren Mitchell. I'm with the Securities and Exchange Commission's Enforcement Division." Her voice was calm, but I caught a tremor of urgency, as if she knew more than she was letting on. My heart stopped momentarily. "We've received an anonymous tip about potential financial improprieties at Horizon Industries involving its new leadership team. The information provided suggested you might have relevant knowledge." I chose my words carefully. "I recently left my position as CFO after 12 years. Yes, we're aware. Would you be willing to meet informally to discuss certain transactions that occurred over the past 8 months? Who else knows you're calling me?" I asked. "No one outside my immediate team. This is preliminary fact-finding, not a formal investigation yet." She paused, then added, "We received a package with your name on it. Hand-delivered, no return address. It's why I'm calling." I considered my options. Going to the SEC directly would make this very public very quickly. Horizon stock would plummet. Thousands of employees, people like Clara and Marcus, could be affected if the company collapsed under a scandal. But someone had already tipped off the SEC. The clock was ticking. "I'll need some time," I said finally. "Time for what, Mr. Whitaker?" "To make sure I get this right." I hung up, my mind racing. Was a friend working with the SEC, or was this a setup to flush me out? I gave myself 4 days to execute my plan. First, I needed to ensure the evidence couldn't be erased. I copied all my documentation to multiple secure locations and set up deadman switches. If I didn't enter a code every 48 hours, the full package would automatically send to the SEC, the Department of Justice, and 3 financial journalists I respected. Next, I carefully drafted emails to the 3 board members I believed were uninvolved: Rachel, Vijay, and George. I didn't accuse anyone directly. Instead, I framed it as concerning patterns I noticed before my departure and included just enough evidence to raise serious questions without overwhelming them with details. I scheduled these to send automatically in 3 days. I also mailed a USB drive with key documents to a trusted friend from college, with instructions to release it if I didn't contact him in a week. The most delicate part came next. I contacted Clara, asking if she could meet me for coffee. She agreed immediately. "They're gutting your whole department," she told me when we met, her voice barely above a whisper. "Liam says we're consolidating financial operations, but half the team has gotten reassignment notices, and the other half is being reviewed." "Including you?" She nodded, blinking back tears. 19 years at Horizon, and suddenly I'm told my position is redundant. I've got 8 weeks to find another role internally, or... She stopped, glancing at a man in sunglasses sitting 2 tables away, his newspaper untouched. "James, I think they're following me too," she whispered. I waited while she composed herself. "Clara, do you remember that audit protocol we established after the Thompson acquisition? The one with the separate verification pathway?" She frowned, then understanding dawned. "The parallel audit trail. The one that automatically duplicates all transactions over $75,000, 0 cents to the secure server. Is it still running?" "As far as I know, it's hard-coded into the system. Liam's team would have to specifically know about it to disable it." I nodded, relief washing over me. "And who has access to those records now?" "Just the senior auditing team, and I guess Liam, since he's CFO. What about the backup archiving? Is that still sent to Iron Mountain on the 1st of each month?" She thought for a moment. "Yes, that's automated too. The November backup would have gone out last week." Clara added, "I checked Project Eclipse again. It's gone from the server, but I saved a screenshot of the file list before it vanished." "Perfect. Even if Ethan and Liam discovered what I was doing and tried to alter the records, the originals would already be safely preserved off-site. Clara, I'm going to ask you something important, and you can absolutely say no." I slid a sealed envelope across the table. Inside is a formal letter detailing specific financial concerns that, as a senior accounting manager, you're obligated to report to internal audit. It references only information you would have legitimate access to in your role. If you submit this, they legally cannot retaliate against you without triggering whistleblower protections. I leaned in, voice low. "Clara, this could expose everything, but it's dangerous. Someone sent me a threat last night." Her hand trembled as she took the envelope. "Is this why they're really pushing me out? Because I might notice these things?" "Probably. And if I submit this, it creates an official internal record that can't be ignored. It forces internal audit to investigate specific transactions, the same ones I've documented elsewhere." Clara squared her shoulders. "When?" "Tomorrow morning would be ideal." She nodded, but her eyes darted to the man with the newspaper who was now on his phone watching us. "I'll do it, James. For you and Margaret." On my way home, I made 2 more stops. First to a notary public, where I signed and authenticated a detailed affidavit about everything I'd discovered. Then to my lawyer's office, where I left sealed instructions to be opened if anything happened to me. That evening, I received a text message from Marcus L. asking lots of questions about old audit protocols. "Seems nervous. Watch yourself." An hour later, my car's tires were slashed and a note was tucked under the wiper. "Last warning." I called the police, but they found no fingerprints, no leads. They were starting to realize their mistake. They'd been so focused on pushing me out that they'd overlooked what I might have already documented. The pieces were in place. Now I just had to wait. 8 weeks after my departure, everything detonated simultaneously. The internal audit, triggered by Clara's formal complaint, reached Liam's desk the same morning that my detailed emails reached the 3 uninvolved board members. By noon, Rachel Thornton had called an emergency board meeting using her authority as audit committee chair. Clara's text came at 11:45. They found Project Eclipse in the backups, Ethan screaming in his office. I'm scared. I wasn't there, but Clara texted me updates throughout the day. Board meeting started at 1:30. Ethan looking pale. Elle just got escorted to a conference room with legal. Outside auditors arrived, taking over main conference room. By evening, the news had broken internally. Horizon was under investigation for financial irregularities. All executives who had joined under Ethan's tenure were placed on administrative leave, pending a full forensic audit. A breaking news alert pinged my phone. An anonymous leak to a major outlet, detailing Project Eclipse and naming Ethan and Liam. A friend had struck again. I turned off my phone and took a long walk along the river, watching the Indianapolis skyline light up as darkness fell. For the first time in months, I felt my shoulders relax. The next morning, I received 3 missed calls from Charles Ramsey, from Ethan, and from Nathan Ramsey. I ignored them all. Instead, I answered a call from George Ellison, our oldest board member. 12 years of clean books, he said. His voice gruff with age, no scandals, no restatements, no missed filings. I should have spoken up when they pushed you out. You're speaking up now, George. That's what matters. He sighed. James, we found a burner phone in Ethan's desk with texts to a hitman. You need to disappear for a while? The board has appointed me acting chairman while we sort through this mess. Charles and Nathan have resigned along with 2 others. We've terminated Ethan and Liam for cause. I said nothing. We'd like you to come back, James, just temporarily to help the forensic team and stabilize things. I watched a barge slowly making its way down the White River, steady and purposeful. I'll help with the investigation, I said finally, but I won't be coming back permanently. May I ask why? Because Horizon needs someone who can innovate, I said, allowing myself a small smile. I'm just a little too old school. I didn't tell him about the safe deposit box I'd rented, holding a duplicate of all my evidence, just in case. 4 months later, I sat on my new deck in Boone, North Carolina, watching the sun set behind the Appalachian Mountains. My cabin wasn't large, just 2 bedrooms and an office, but the view made up for it. The investigation at Horizon had uncovered exactly what I'd suspected, a coordinated scheme to extract value through fraudulent contracts and artificial costs. Ethan, Liam, and several board members now faced federal charges for securities fraud and embezzlement. The trial revealed Project Eclipse was a code name for a plan to bankrupt Horizon and sell its assets to a rival firm, with Ethan and Liam pocketing millions offshore. I'd spent 8 weeks helping the forensic accountants unravel everything, then packed up my Indianapolis house and headed for the mountains Margaret and I had always talked about retiring to. The settlement Horizon offered for my consulting services during the investigation was generous, enough to buy this cabin outright and still have plenty left over. I'd been clear with them. No public statements, no press conferences, no dramatic returns. That wasn't my style. A local reporter tried to interview me, claiming a friend had named me as the whistleblower, but I declined, knowing anonymity was my shield. My phone buzzed with a text from Clara. Got the promotion to Director of Accounting. The new CEO wants to rebuild the department properly. I smiled and typed back. Well deserved. Always keep a parallel audit trail. My lawyer had called yesterday with news that the SEC was closing its case against Horizon after the company agreed to governance reforms and financial penalties that pointedly excluded punishment for shareholders and regular employees, the right outcome. He also mentioned a sealed letter from a friend delivered to his office, thanking me for finishing what they started. I never opened it. As darkness settled over the mountains, I opened the leather notebook Margaret had given me years ago. Inside was the last photo we'd taken together at the lake house the summer before her diagnosis. You were right, I said to her smiling face. I should have made more time for views like this. Tomorrow, I'd drive into town and meet with the director of a local nonprofit who needed help organizing their finances. Nothing flashy, just good, clean accounting for people doing important work. Some might call that old school. I just called it integrity. As I closed the notebook, a final text arrived from an unknown number. You won, James. Stay safe. I deleted it, but the weight of those words lingered, a reminder that some battles never truly end